gather round me, children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. The doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi, so just to remind everyone, before we get started in the episode, you can get us on Facebook and Twitter at PGMcast. You can go to our website and you can read all about pretty much all our sources and everything at www.notanotherfakenewscast.com. If you want, you can drop us an email at info@notanotherfakenewscast.com. And if you're really feeling generous, you can go to patreon.com/PGMcast and you can chuck us a buck, donate us a bit of money. So on to the interview. Thanks. Hi, and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Jerry, and we're here today with Rowland Manthorpe, who is a tech correspondent from Sky News. Nice to have you here, Rowland. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
Hey, great to be here.
So, I mean, I guess the first question that we like to ask all our guests who work in journalism and the media is, how did you get here? You know, what brought you down this career path?
Oh, well, it was quite a long, twisty, winding route. But I suppose, what I did before I was at Sky News, probably kind of most relevant. I was at Wired, the tech magazine. And while I was there, I set up kind of Wired's first ever sort of politics section on the website. I did, I think, one of their first ever politics covers. And I'd sort of started a tech and politics podcast. And that was all because I'd been sort of working in tech journalism. I kind of drifted into that. I've been doing that for quite a while. And I had a background in politics. Like I studied politics at university, and my first job out of university was working for a think tank. And my whole career, well, at that point in my career, it was like, these two things just didn't mesh at all. And then, at a certain point, it was like, oh wow, they really mesh quite a lot. So I started looking at this tech and politics things, and I've been really focusing on that. Quite a long time now. I guess like 5 or 6 years that I've sort of been really just concentrating on tech and politics, or politics and tech, if you know what I mean. Before it was big.
Nice. So how did you end up sort of writing particularly about tech? Like, what can I ask? What think tank it was that you were involved in? Yeah.
So I worked for the RSA. It's like an independent think tank. It was mainly known at the time, and it still is, because it's run by a guy called Matthew Taylor, who used to work for Blair. But this was sort of in like the late 2000s, which, looking back, was a kind of ridiculously apolitical time. And so, like, the quote unquote hot thing was social policy. And right. So I worked. So the big thing that I did when I was there was I worked on a project about pensions.
Oh wow!
Pension reform. Yeah, well, I mean, you see why I didn't end up sticking it out. So I worked on a project about pension reform, which actually became, basically, it was about the thing that became the auto-enroll scheme. So as a result, I don't have my own finances like especially well sorted, but I am a big fan of the auto-enroll scheme. And I've done a few pieces on sort of tech and finance. But I suppose it's more just that I felt like I'd spent a lot of time looking and observing and understanding that political world in a way that, say, like in 2014, 2015, all the people that I knew in tech didn't at all. They really disdained politics. It was sort of seen as that tech is above politics or indifferent to politics or is going to solve politics. And I always thought that seemed a bit strange, and then kind of events seemed to prove my case. And then when I started really covering that, I felt like I really had something to bring to it.
Yeah, and I suppose that the last kind of six years at least have kind of demonstrated to us that actually tech's massively important potentially to politics and has a massive massive capability to change politics or to influence politics, certainly. So yeah, it's a marriage that might not have seemed natural at the time, but you've been proven right.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's hard to imagine just back then. I remember like that I pitched my editor, who was quite a kind of old school London tech scene kind of guy. He sort of moved on after that, but I pitched him a piece about doing something on a union, and he said, "We don't do unions at Wired." and it's
did he
funny
say it like that?
Yes, he really did.
Spat his brandy across the room.
He said, we're about innovation, like really sort of definitively like that. And obviously, like since then, the IWGB, you know, the International Workers Union of Great Britain. I think I've got their name wrong, but it's basically the Freelancers Union, which has been representing those two Uber drivers, or kind of partly representing those two Uber drivers who've been suing Uber in the High Court. I've covered that case now, going on for 3 years, and it's one of the most important cases about technology that's happened in this country, I think. And it all came out of that union and with the things they were doing. But it just didn't seem that way at the time. It really didn't.
But you managed to, I guess you must have managed to persuade some people in there that, you know, that your way of thinking had some merit.
Yeah, well, this particular editor moved on. I think that probably had a lot to do with it.
Right, okay.
That's the thing, though. The time scale that you're talking about is the time scale that politics have realised the impact of technology. I mean, like, essentially, they were possibly, we can argue, and we probably all agree, but that they were quite slow in the uptake, as in, I mean, even still now, there's a lot of legislation that still exists that protects print media and postal media and that type of stuff that you can not completely, and we are getting better, but you can certainly avoid certain avenues if you're using social media and digital media, because there's lots of archaic laws and rules that don't incorporate digital into it, because it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't seen as a thing, and now it's very much arguably the only thing, or certainly one of the most important components to pretty much any political campaign.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, I remember. So I was doing a piece about political advertising on Facebook, I guess about sort of maybe this time last year or a bit around then. And we'd taken some video ads off Facebook, and we were planning to show them on screen. And just as we were getting it ready with a few hours to go, the lawyer comes running over, being like, "Stop! You can't broadcast those on TV." Because basically, is that if we were broadcasting political ads without the proper framework and everything, then we could be in breach of Ofcom regulations.
Yeah,
but I was just like, but you know, these things are on the internet, that anyone can see them anywhere, and we're doing a piece about political ads. But in the end, we couldn't. So what we had to do is we had to sort of like put them inside a kind of screen graphic, if you see what I mean, to put them in context. But that was one of those moments when I was like, I cannot believe this is happening, but it really is.
But I mean, it shows the kind of ridiculousness of the kind of unregulated nature, if you will, of a lot of this stuff. You know, obviously, it's like the law hasn't quite caught up to the capability of the technology, and you know that was very apparent when some of the ads came out that were used in some of the referendum campaign and the Trump campaign and stuff like that in America. I think that was when people sort of start to wake up and realise, oh, hold on a minute, this is something we maybe need to keep an eye on.
I think one of the things when you said there that anyone can see it, but the bit that is arguably more dangerous is you can make the people you want to see the specific adverts see it, which is something that realistically, although you had functions before to be able to try and do that, you can do it with a much more degree of accuracy now. Essentially, you can create ad sets for groups of specific people that are relevant to those specific people and target that entire group as with those adverts that you know they're going to see, and you know they're like spending 80% of their life on their phone and on like Facebook and on Twitter, so they're going to see these things rather than having targeted adverts that you have to hope they drive by the billboard or do they read the leaflet that's came through their door. It's a very different environment now, so it's even more dangerous than anyone can see it. It's more the people you want to see it can see it, and you can guarantee, because you can get analytics back on that. You can say they looked at it, they watched it X amount of time, they clicked on it.
Yeah, I know. Although it was really funny, because basically it's that if we talked, say, in November, right before the general election, I would have been nodding along, agreeing with you, 100%. But it's funny because that theory didn't exactly play out in the general election. And honestly, I still haven't really had a chance to go back and find out why, because I was on paternity leave straight in January, February, and then obviously I've been coronavirus reporter since then. But yeah, it was really funny because there didn't seem to be that much of that kind of really specific micro-targeting going on. And also that the Tories, who've got the most money and who everyone expected to really splash the cash in a massive way on Facebook, didn't. And afterwards, Dominic Cummings wrote that it wasn't all about Facebook anymore. So it's funny how kind of that I still think that theory is really true, and that it's in that particular case, it didn't quite stand up that it was all about the market targeting. It was really interesting.
No, and I don't think it's necessarily something that is the only way to do it, but it's certainly it's a tool in the toolkit now that maybe didn't exist before.
Yeah,
I think Bloomberg's another great example of throwing lots of money at Facebook ads doesn't necessarily work, you know.
Yeah, but I think but in general the point that this is a new form of media, and that it can't be understood via the old rules. I couldn't agree more.
And I think, just there is, it's speculation on my part, but I would imagine with the things that happened at the start of last year and stuff, with all the other things that had happened, with the lawsuits with Cambridge Analytica and all that type of stuff and all those bits that happened, it does very much, there is an argument to say that there is possibly a fear in the old establishment of utilising these in such a way because much the same as there's no regulation to what it is that you're doing, there's also no guarantee that what you're doing isn't going to come back and bite you. So, for example, the Trump campaign before, we know there was a lot of targeted adverts and micro-targeting and stuff like that. There has obviously been lots of fallout, both legal and political, off the back of that for the last 4 years, essentially. So I can imagine that if you are working in that space for the Tories, it's very, there's a component of fear where, maybe we don't do this because if we do this and we do this incorrectly, we could find ourselves in a 3-year legal case that is grounds to impeachment for Trump at one point. Do you know what I mean? That type of stuff.
It's potentially the effect of having good journalists doing good work and showing a lot of things which had happened. The fact that, people maybe are in a position where they are aware that people are going to go through this stuff with a fine-tooth comb and have a look at it and pull them up on kind of wrongdoing, means that they're maybe less likely to cross any lines. That they're going to keep things a lot more by the book potentially in that situation. But as you say, it's conjecture here. Sorry,
you wanted to ask a question, because go for it. Go for it. I was going to say something very nerdy about political ads on Facebook. Actually, I suppose this is the place, isn't it?
This is exactly the place to do that. Yes. So go on.
In that case, then, because while it's very kind of you to give credit to journalists, that probably the people we should really be giving credit to here are Facebook, if this theory is right. Because what we didn't have in 2016 and 2017 is the Facebook ad archive of political ads, where we can all see the ads that are going up. And I was told by an ex-Tory strategist that this factored into their mindset, definitely. The fact that say the people like me were combing over that constantly, and that we could point out if they were giving one kind of ads to one group and another contradictory set of ads to another group. So, loath as I am to do it, I wonder if actually maybe that Facebook actually kind of got that right. Yeah, and they are the only regulator in this space, and maybe on that one, it's been quite effective. Although it's funny, it doesn't seem to have the same effect in the US. Maybe, but it's obviously a very different political culture.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a soundbite that Mark Zuckerberg's going to be using the next time he finds himself in court.
Yeah, I mean,
should give it-
they're smart. They are smart people. They do think about this stuff. Even if
Definitely
I
are.
at this point, I absolutely have to add that they do a horrible job keeping it up, and it's really terrible to use, and they should really improve it. I have to say that on behalf of all researchers in this area.
So you mentioned the court case with the Uber drivers earlier on in the High Court that's been going on for the past 3 years. So for our listeners who aren't aware of that, could you maybe give a brief synopsis of what that's about and why you think it's so important?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's been brought by two kind of former Uber drivers, James Farrar and Yassim Aslam. And basically, there are three types of employment status in this country. There's self-employed, there's fully employed, and then there's this one in the middle that people don't really know about called worker status. These Uber drivers, they're trying to claim worker status, which has some of the rights, but not all of the rights of kind of full employment, and some of the flexibility, but not all the flexibility of self-employment. And essentially, Uber and all these platforms, they classify people as self-employed. And what James and Yassine argue is that they cannot be self-employed when they are not really, really, truly allowed to choose the terms of their own employment. So just to give one example, if you ever get an Uber, ask yourself, who have I contracted with? Because if you look at the receipt, you get that email afterwards, and it'll say that it says that you've contracted with the driver through an entity. I think it's in the Netherlands. It's either in the Netherlands or Luxembourg. That's the legal framework that Uber has, that you've contracted with the driver. But you can't then call that driver for another ride, can you? You can't even, until recently, sit in the car and say, oh, hey, actually, you know what? Do you mind if we go on to another place? If you try and do that, the driver will be like, oh, no. You need to get on the app and then try and rehire me. So you're not really, as James and Yassine argue, and they have won or is it 3 cases, and they've won in the Court of Appeal. They're beating Uber on this. There's one case to go in the Supreme Court. What they say is, look, we are not really free as self-employed people. And that is why, therefore, you should give us some of the rights of workers, for example, holiday pay, kind of maternity and paternity leave, and other rights like that. And obviously this is a very important kind of case from a workers' rights perspective. And you have to forgive me because I can't remember the figures, but if Uber really had to pay and kind of treat its drivers like that, I mean, I've seen statistics which suggest that it would be kind of company ending potentially.
Yeah, kill their business model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for Uber. So it's an incredibly significant case. I wonder if at the end we might end up with some incredibly elaborate fudge where it turns out that actually, in the end, James and Yassine win, but it turns out that somehow it doesn't apply to all drivers; it just applies to them, or something like that, where sort of all the seemingly grand things that are going to come out of it actually don't. But it's a really important, significant case, and it's been one of the first cases in the world, and it's been mimicked around the world. So a lot of eyes on it when it eventually does come to court.
Yeah, and I suppose in an environment where employment law and stuff, certainly for self-employed people, there's been a lot of changes to legislation around IR35 and stuff like that. Anyway, so as a self-employed person myself, we've started having to go through sort of sit and go through assessments essentially with our employer to determine whether we're inside or outside IR35. That has a large bearing on what rights we have, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. If that's been pushed on certain sections of employment in the UK, then it really should apply to everybody. So when do we have a kind of end date for this legal process with these two drivers?
Not at the moment. I haven't checked in with them recently, but obviously with everything the way it is, I can't imagine there is a date. but yeah, I mean, in theory, it should be the last one. This is the Supreme Court hearing, so
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's so crazy to me that these two like totally ordinary people have had to pursue this case for such a long time. I mean, watching it develop in real time, it really makes me feel so strongly that there's something really broken about the legal system.
Yeah.
That it just has gone on for so long, and it feels like it's wrong for the company as well. Like I mean, maybe you might say that they've dragged it out for their own purposes, but surely everyone just wants clarity. It's crazy. And, like you've seen, for example, I mean, I saw him one time. He'd been driving all night, and then he was outside the court the next day. And
so he's still driving for Uber throughout.
Not for Uber, for another company.
No. Yeah, I was gonna say that'd have been a little awkward.
But that's it. I mean, I'm sure there's implications of this moving forward with things like, I can't be 100% sure. So just an idea, like I know that lots of guys that I know who work for, say, Amazon as a driver, are all drivers, they're self-employed, but they would argue very similar scenarios to the fact that they actually can't be delivering for anything else because they have to be delivering. They have to meet criteria that they can't. There's not enough hours in the day for them to do anything else apart from meet the framework that makes them a delivery driver for Amazon. So, I mean, imagine there's a lot of big companies out there who also have similar, not the exact same, but very similar frameworks that may have a knock-on effect to this ruling, depending on how it works out.
Yeah, and we're really we're kind of at the beginning of a timeline potentially where big tech and algorithms really start to mold the workplace and the labour market around the world. And writers like Noah Yuval Harari have kind of written about potentially whether we go down a universal benefit type scenario, but do these companies end up with a moral imperative to ensure that society is still able to function in some way? Are they paying their taxes correctly? All of this stuff kind of factors in, because you might be in a situation where, as tech advances, people don't. There's not jobs to replace the jobs that they're displacing, essentially, and that could really affect a lot of unskilled labour around the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you saw those statistics the other day that private hire drivers were among the occupations most likely to have died of COVID-19. And you could argue that that's a direct consequence of their employment conditions and their inability to take time off. And at the beginning of this whole thing, that I spoke to some Deliveroo couriers who were struggling to get the. I don't want to get the details wrong, so I'm going to be a bit vague. But basically, it's that I think it's that they were kind of struggling to get certain payments that Deliveroo had offered them. I think that was it. Anyway, but what they were saying is that they felt like that they only had a couple of weeks left, and then they'd have to go out. And I mean, and Deliveroo is like a slightly different case to Uber in terms of how the algorithm operates and the kind of the strength of the algorithm in terms of as a boss. But I feel like we're seeing, in a sense, is that we're seeing like the last 40 years of automation and its impact on the labour market really play out in such devastating ways at the moment. But at the same time, I mean, will Uber even exist in its present form after this? Because I mean, their profits are massively down. No one wants to get in an Uber. It feels like so hard to kind of to know where this will go after everything will go after this.
Well, I mean, I can certainly say straight off the bat, I've not had a taxi in any form for 9 weeks, maybe 10 weeks anyway. Do you know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't I drive, do you know what I mean? So I wasn't a massive user of taxis, but much the same way, I think it's almost like a forgotten profession when you talk about things like pubs are shut and hospitality services are shut. Well, but all those people who got taxis to the pubs and to the restaurants and home from nights out are now not doing that either. And it's a component which, even when things start opening up, you are in close quarters. And I mean, there is no way that you can guarantee that a taxi driver is getting out after every single person's in and disinfecting all the seats and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's going to be a genuine fear.
Yeah, plus it's basically like being in a room with someone, maybe for an hour. It's like taking a cab with someone is actually quite a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, a room that a lot of other people have been in recently as well.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Yeah,
I mean, actually, I need to check in with all my Uber driver contacts, see how they're getting on. I mean, everything is so relentlessly busy at the moment. I feel like I'm sort of missing stories constantly, and it's so hard to tell the stories of everything that's going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you've been incredibly busy covering the sort of coronavirus-based stuff. So, in terms of some of the, what are the biggest stories you think that you've seen come out in the tech world during this pandemic?
Oh, I mean, this contact tracing app, it is enormous. It is so enormous. I was tweeting the other day that I thought it was the most powerful robot ever unleashed in the UK, or let's assume that it gets rolled out in its present form, because what people don't necessarily know is that truly automated decisions are actually really, really rare. Like normally,
Yeah.
that most kind of automated systems, ultimately what they do is they offer you a suggestion. Like Facebook's friend recommender, or what you might want to buy next on Amazon. They're offering you a suggestion, and then you choose how to buy it. Like maybe, I mean, and I've argued this in the past. The suggestion is super powerful. But I mean, it definitely has a big impact. But they're ultimately just suggestions, and most government systems work that way as well. But if this app rolls out, it's got an automated deciding kind of process of risk scoring inside it. That basically is that it will decide how much at risk you are of having contracted COVID-19, and then it will effectively tell you to stay inside. I mean, that is a robot on a kind of unimaginable scale with the power to actually effectively imprison people. I mean,
when you put it like that, it's kind of dystopian.
There's actually the dangerous inverse of that, which is where does the liability stand if said robot decides that you're okay and you can go out, and then it turns out that was the wrong decision? Like, essentially, because going in the idea that we don't have proper laws and legislation in the UK for how you advertise on Facebook, the idea that we've got proper legislation in for a robot told me it was okay to go outside and infected the public with a virus is probably very, very slim if that goes to court. And that's the other side of it. Instead of it mocking you down, there's a very real danger that you have removed any real
element of responsibility.
Yeah, because well, I mean, it was the robot that decided. I mean, but who controlled the robot? Well, the robot made the decisions.
Oh, you raise a good point. Well, there's a very sort of niche and nerdy argument going on at the moment about the definition of automated decision making under GDPR. And I have not been following it in the last couple of days, so it's probably evolved. But essentially, is that you have the right to be told when an automated decision is being made about you, and you obviously have the right to kind of request your data. But I have no idea what that means. Whether someone could sue, and they could say that listen, like you told me. God, now you think about it, it's frighteningly plausible, isn't it? Is that you? Is that because it's that what you could do is that you could put in a subject access request, and you could find out what your risk score is. And so at the moment, I'm been sort of talking to some mathematicians to try and work out exactly what this means. So I don't know quite yet, but I'm trying to find out. But the risk threshold they use is 1.83. Say you were 1.82 and you were allowed to go out, and then you caught coronavirus and you were kind of like had a massive effect on your life, and you could persuade a court that actually they'd made that calculation incorrectly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. This is a great story. I'll have to talk to some lawyers about it. I have no idea what they'll say.
It's a lot of responsibility on the person making the ultimate decision on where that risk level sits, I guess, right?
Yeah, hugely.
But the thing is, you've got a group of developers that, for all intents and purposes, are creating a very complex workflow process for this in the background. Did this happen? Did that happen? X, Y, Z, and then it comes out with the result. But the thing is, you can't you can't hold them accountable for if the information that they're working on says as long as you're 1.83, you are fine, or you can't get it, or you can't spread it. If that is seen as fact, and you are told at 1.82 or 1.84 that everything is fine, but and then it turns out not to be the case, everything that workflow has said is factually correct, but you have acted directly on the advice of that piece of information. So that you could argue that you wouldn't have went out without that piece of information being given to you. So, and then the onus is on that piece of information that you've got from the app for you to have made that decision.
I mean, the thing that's interesting to me in all of this is that, you know, it's little wonder that there are so many companies kind of desperate for an opportunity to get involved in this stuff, because it's a real opportunity for them to actually engage in a real world model, which, you know, a lot of artificial intelligence builders and developers just don't really ever get the opportunity to do, and potentially they're being allowed to manipulate data and work with data which they may have struggled to get access to in times of, you know, in normal times, right? So it's and I'm not suggesting anything nefarious within that. All I'm saying is that, you know, they're bound to be jumping at the chance to actually be able to get to see real data rather than computer modeled data, and start to play around with it and see how they can tweak algorithms and see how something actually works in the field, which they've probably only ever really spoken about or experimented with before.
Feels like it's mainly academics at the moment, definitely with the app.
Yeah,
so it's like academics, and also I reckon that a lot of people working on it are finding out just how stressful and unpleasant it is to do a really high profile task for this. I bet they're thinking, wow, just doing something really simple for Microsoft or whatever that will impact like 2 billion people, and everyone is really nice to each other, and you have proper management, and there aren't like journalists trying to, you know, do FOI requests for your emails. They're probably thinking, actually, honestly, we better leave it. But with the app, I think is that the formulas seem to be drawing on academic work, and then the developers are this like sort of, I think they're a British company, but they were taken over by a big American company.
So, in kind of layman's terms, then, we our listeners, I guess, there's a big Venn diagram of like political nerds and tech nerds, and they kind of meet somewhere in the middle. But there's probably
actually another one. There's an audio nerd. There's a lot of audio nerds that listen to us as well. We get
complaints.
Hello, nerds.
Yes.
But yeah. So you know, if imagine you're talking to somebody who really doesn't understand the tech. How does this stuff work?
So the contact tracing app, it works via the Bluetooth on your phone. And when you go out the house and you've got the app on, then it'll ping everyone else on the Bluetooth on everyone else's phone, and it will store on both your phones an anonymized list of all those contacts. And I can see you're saying anonymized.
Yeah, anonymized.
So obviously there is a debate here, right, about whether it's truly anonymized or if it's pseudonymized. But
we can leave that till later.
Yeah,
it's not technical. I've sort of made peace with myself that it's fair to call it anonymized, because I think that what most people understand as being anonymous is probably pretty accurate here. And I think actually is that you can have like a fair amount of trust in the fact that these are anonymized. Anyway, then what they are is definitely like not. It's just a kind of public list, or like you're exchanging phone numbers or anything like that. And then if
it's a shame, because it'd be really handy for perverts.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, perverts. Well, we can talk about that later. I think the perverts are going to have so many golden opportunities to really, really do new things with this app. But yeah, basically, then if you get symptoms of COVID-19, then you report those into the app, and if your symptoms they give you a short quiz like, do you have a continuous cough? Have you got a high fever? And if your symptoms match those, then basically you can upload all your contacts onto the NHS system, and it will run through this complicated algorithm and then it will basically ping all the people that it thinks are at risk of contracting COVID-19 because they've been near you. And it will say to them, hey, look, you've been near someone who's self-reported COVID-19 symptoms. You should probably self-isolate. Then you, the original person, you get a test. And if your test comes back positive, all those people will get another notification saying, bad news, I'm afraid. That person you were near, they've had a test and it's positive. Please, I don't know exactly what they'll say, but say please self-isolate for 7 days. Or you're actually, great news, you'll get the all clear. And then all those people will get notifications saying, okay, never mind, we got that one wrong. You're free to go out now. And obviously the idea, the really kind of the reason why I kind of the thing that I try and remind everyone about this, because it's really easy to get kind of worried about the privacy and talk about all the details. The big purpose is to try and get us out of this lockdown and to try and give us some kind of degree of freedom so that we can go out, but we can also have some measure of safety. And the way I see it is that contact tracing, everyone knows, is really important. This, for me, it's a way of kind of giving scale and sort of digital digital know-how isn't a very good way of describing it, to contact tracing. Because even with the best will in the world, you might have the best memory ever, but you're never going to remember the name and phone number of that person that you stood behind in a supermarket queue for 20 minutes, and that person, could be in danger. So I think that the principle, I think the principle is really important to remember.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that in principle it is. So the reason that I've done the air quotes around anonymised is even though the data is, without a doubt, as our listeners mostly know anyway, my background is in IT and stuff, so the data will be very encrypted for a start, but on top of that, it will be anonymous to a layman by any manner of means. But for the data to be able to contact and work out who you have been in contact with, there is some format of unique identifier. And this is where the debate almost kind of comes from, that the issue doesn't exist of someone getting a hold of the data and working out where you've been and stuff like that. It would be very, very difficult for them to do that without a whole pile of source code and understanding what's happening. The question comes with, where does said data get stored? And subsequently, I know they say it's offline or whatever, but where the data, for it to upload to a location like the NHS or whatever, there has to be a storage. Then how accessible is that data to the police, for example? Just using them as a broad example, because it then means that you can, obviously, the way it's been collected means that you can't use it in court because of the way that the legal system works in the UK, but you can use it to build a case around you, knowing who you've been in contact with. And I think that's where a lot of the things come from. Now, for the most part, like I said, people shouldn't be concerned that their data is going to be stolen, have some hooded hacker in a basement somewhere, because that's mental and it's just far too complex to even perceive. But the danger is, maybe there's people who don't want their family members or other half to know who they associate with and stuff like that, and by virtue they don't want the police or the government to know this, and that's where the paranoia comes from, and that's always going to exist as long as you are using any unique identifier to be able to trace people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that that is a real danger. There are technical things they're doing to kind of get around it, like that they changed the Bluetooth IDs. I can't remember how frequently they change them. It might be daily, and with the gold standard is every 15 minutes. But they do change them, and I think basically if a hacker got into this database, they just see a bunch of meaningless numbers. It wouldn't mean anything to them. But you're right, basically, that this is called the social graph risk.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is there. It is a real risk. On the other hand, I think you have to kind of play that off against the power of the database.
I mean, I would also argue, and the caveat that I would put to that is, if you were really, really concerned about it, you probably own a smartphone anyway. And in the event they really wanted to use many of the things that you have clicked accept to when you're on various applications that are on your devices and various providers of devices, there's a lot of metadata that's been collected across a whole spectrum of different apps and devices that you've got on you already. That means that if they really, really, really wanted to put into the effort, a lot of that information is still readily available if they wanted to build a case or people were looking into you anyway. So, that's where your concern lies. Like, unless you go out the house without your smartwatch and your smartphone and all the other, you know what I mean? You don't have Alexas and that in your house or whatever. There's a high probability that you're not going to be traced any more than you're already being traced.
Yeah, but also,
the majority of us who have iPhones have our location services enabled 24/7 so that we can use Find My iPhone in the event that we leave it in the back of a taxi somewhere, or leave it in a pub or whatever else. So this is it's technology that we're already employing on a daily basis for the most part for most of us. It's I guess but perhaps a concern that some people have is who they're allowing access to this data, etc., etc. But I mean, put it this way: what if the app gets rolled out, Rowland? Will you be installing it on your phone?
I'm not sure yet because we haven't seen all the information that we need to see to make a really good judgment about it. But based on what I've seen so far, then yeah, I would actually. And I find it really worrying the amount of fear there is out there about it. And I was chatting to a GP today because I was filming a piece about antibody testing.
Yeah,
and he was telling me that he's come across a lot of fear about this app. And I feel like the GPs, they come across a pretty good cross section of society. That's not like someone saying, "Oh, I see on Twitter people are really going on about it." And I take that really seriously. Is that I'm quite concerned that people might not use this potentially quite powerful tool because they're scared about things that are legitimate concerns, but they're concerns that people in my world, in the privacy and the kind of the tech and the civic tech world, have. That maybe I worry that maybe we haven't put them in proportion. I read an article the other day about kind of like a sort of an app in India, I think it was a similar app, and it was talking about all the data protection concerns, and they sound absolutely awful. But it didn't at any point say whether the app would actually work. And I think is that right now in this pandemic, it's really important. It's really important that us that us kind of in the tech world. That we think about actually, will it stop this killer virus, which is ruining all our lives?
Do you think the reliance? Do you think the reliance on self-reporting is a potential weakness in the tech in the app?
Yes, big time. I mean, really, I think it's potentially a really serious weakness. But this is why I think they've come to that decision, I'm still sort of working out the technical details on this, but this is where I am right now. That basically is that with a decentralized app, it's very hard to keep it secure if you've got self-reporting. And in this and with this virus, time matters an enormous amount. Like basically, is that the modelling that's done by this kind of Oxford University group, it suggests that if you wait 72 hours after the onset of symptoms to let everyone you've been near know that you've got coronavirus, then the whole system is basically useless. If you wait 48 hours, it's like really pretty useless. It doesn't really make much of a difference. You need to be letting people know within 24 hours after the onset of symptoms that they might be at risk. And to do that, you basically need either lightning fast testing or self-reporting. And it doesn't seem like we have the capacity to do lightning fast testing in this country. And so that leads you to do self-reporting, which then leads you to a centralized app. And so the question that I want the decentralized app people to answer, which they don't seem to be able to, or not to my satisfaction, is what are you going to do about this kind of pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic transmission, that really early stage transmission, which is so important in this virus? I haven't seen a good answer to that. And that to me means that there's a really good case for having this centralized app so you can do self-reporting.
It does now. I'm just like, so one of the things that always came up when we used to do software development was throwing out curveballs. So is there not the opportunity here for abuse? Now, I'm not saying that anyone would, but if you took an area in London and you went out with 4 or 5 or 6 phones and wandered about for 4 or 5 hours, and then you put that you were like fucking coughing up blood and you bleeding at the eyes and all sorts, and you ticked all the boxes that said you had the worst case of coronavirus ever, that automatically determines...
you bleeding's on your septum, Paul.
This is, something to do with toilet paper. I don't
Theme
know.
hospital.
But the long and short is, if you tick all the bad boxes and you've done that with 10 phones and you actively tried to cover an area, say 1 mile, 2 miles squared each with those 10 phones, and you put that in London in a busy day in the middle of like a Monday morning or something like that, is there not the very real danger that because it is completely automated, that all it does is say, we have 10 cases in this area, it pings all these people that you have been in contact with or past, and then suddenly what you have done is you have artificially locked down a subsection of London in one go, because you have been able to do that by buying 10 cheap smartphones off the internet. And I've just realised that I may have gave people an idea as I've said that, and I kind of don't know if I should have. But my point being,
that never even occurred to me. By the way,
do you want to know so there's a problem that I know that NHSX and NCSC, which is the branch of GCHQ, which is helping them on this. I know they've looked at this problem, right, and they don't have a solution, and it's the stalker problem. So you see a famous person around and you decide because you're feeling malicious that you're going to follow them, and basically you're going to quarantine them. So you follow them around and establish proximity with your phones, and then you self-quarantine, and then you do this maliciously to target them. That is people, this is the sort of thing that people come
Parliament. Well, you could cripple Parliament. I mean, the basic principle, the basic principle that I just put forward there, instead of being a random subset, if you go to Westminster with 10 phones with 10 people from 10 sections of London, and you kick about there for 5-6 hours, and then they all go home, then they all put on their thing that they have got the worst cases of corona ever, the amount of people that you could pick up from Parliament would absolutely cripple Parliament for 14 days until they've got results on that. So that could be used maliciously.
Oh, 100%. So the example that they talk about, kind of NCSC, is that what if you got a phone with an amplifier, so you could basically make it seem as if you were near an entire hospital or the whole of Westminster, and then you self-declared as positive. Then you could basically cripple Westminster. And what they say is that in a centralised system, they could detect that essentially by using kind of fraud detection techniques, the sort of techniques that you use to see if someone's scamming your bank. Whereas in a decentralized system, you couldn't do that, and that's why you have to have, in a decentralized system, you have to have verification by testing. But of course, I mean, is that you see how where this goes is that the kind of it sort of leads you towards a we must always have more data to protect you kind of route. But but the reasoning, I think the reasoning is really sound. It definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. The reason is sound. I'm only just doing essentially, like I said, what we would do if you were in like the start of a new development for a bit of software, and it's like so the work like when we used to do disaster planning for data centers, it'd be like you would talk about the main things, just be like, so what happens if a plane crashes through the fucking roof tomorrow? And people would be like, how's that going to happen? It's like, no, but this is what we're doing. It's disaster recovery, so it might happen. So do we have something that we can roughly shoehorn into this scenario? And by the same basic principle, if you could take a PC, which, for those who don't know, who listen, when you do software development apps and stuff like that for mobile devices, you don't have all the mobile devices. You do it on you've got virtual phones essentially that you're running on. Now, the logic stands that a combination of that, understanding IT, being able to bounce your signal about so it's not particularly trackable, you could viably have a scenario where you're like spoofing where you are, like you were saying, and even though there is the claim that they could track it down, there obviously is the very real danger. Now, what other good example would be something like a sporting event. You don't have to be at a sporting event, but if you know there is a big, massive sporting event, like say, I don't know, the Olympics in Japan, You could cause a massive problem if you could make it look like. I mean, Olympics in Japan would be a bad example for the app in the UK.
I was going to say, I don't think they'll be using this app.
It's a really powerful amplifier.
Yeah, that's a real good one. No, but my point being, something of that size, of that magnitude, you know what I mean? A big, massive sporting event, World Cup, or, you know, I mean, like a big, like, even just a cup final in England, like for the Premier League, like you would have that many people around that you could certainly cause. It stands that you could have negative. Now, I'm not trying to be dour about it, because I do actually believe that, because the other side of it is, what else can you do? Like, the other argument is, what else can you do? Facial recognition and have people wear like ID bands in their arm. Like,
this is the thing. No, this is the thing. I think we can all agree that there's hypothetical scenarios for misuse, which, you know, obviously they are thinking about. That's why security services and intelligence services are advising on this. However, that does then lead down the route that you were talking about, Rowland, where, okay, well, so we need to have more data from you to keep you safe. So where do we draw the line, and how do we, there's a potential that we find ourselves in a scenario where we have to sort of pass temporary legislation in order to allow for collection of extra data, to allow us to kind of bypass data privacy laws, etc., on the very sound justification that we require to keep the population safe and to try and get out of this lockdown scenario we find ourselves in. The problem then becomes, you know, as we've kind of seen historically, it's not always easy to roll back these extra powers once they have been granted. For example, we can look at the Terrorism Act. You know, the government essentially still have the power to detain people without due process in this country if they are declared a suspect under a terrorism charge. So how do we combat that? Where do we draw the line, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to see. I think it would help everyone in this debate if they did pass an act of parliament specifically for this, just to be really, really, really clear about it.
Yeah.
Because it's that, you know, like, people who work on it and people like me can talk about privacy preserving gateways until we're blue in the face. But if people don't have that fundamental trust that these systems will stay that way, then none of it matters. And this whole thing isn't going to work without trust. I think my sense of this is that the politicians don't think this is a real issue out in the real world. They think it's a Twitter bubble, you know, for nerds kind of thing. But that's why, like, when I heard when that GP told me that there was a lot of fear about it, I thought, oh, okay, maybe this idea has got out there, and I find that worrying. But also is that if it led to the government to put on statute some really strict controls about this, then I think that would be a good thing. Although the one thing I also think about this is that, like, this is I've been having some slightly heretical thoughts during the course of this pandemic. You know, the sort of things that get me a bad name in the tech community. But there is a part of me which just thinks, well, you know, this is a democratically elected government. If they want to change their mind later about what they do with this app, then that's actually kind of a really important principle of government. Like, it's a sort of central principle of government that you can't bind future governments. And putting in absolutely rigid technological putting them in a technological straitjacket. So, say, for example, that they've committed to absolutely deleting all the data. I mean, yeah, maybe that data could be really useful. And maybe we might think that we could really use it to help get us out of this horrible situation. I find myself thinking things like that, because I do find it quite strange that there's this sort of popular rush to anoint Google and Apple as being the saviors in this situation. And I mean, like, is that I've got to say their solution from a technological point of view, it does have lots of benefits. But I mean, they're like massive global corporations.
Massive GDP.
Apple from a data point of view. So I am not by any manner of means, and I'm very much on record. Like I work in IT, but I'm a Windows based IT, or certainly Windows and like Ubuntu and that type of thing. Whereas I'm not an Apple guy at all. Like, but I did work for Apple in some format for a while, and my phone is an iPhone, right? So I worked for the company that done all the repairs and sales and all the Apple work for the whole of Scotland and North of England before we had Apple stores in the UK. So I actually worked in an Apple store in Glasgow before there was Apple stores in the UK. So I worked for them for a long time. My father was the tech director there. So that's
Is that why you hate them so much?
No, that's one of the reasons, right? That's one of the reasons. But my phone has always been an iPhone, and it has been for 15 years, 16, 17 years, I think, because
runs really slow now.
Yeah, it's just the battery life is dreadful. I have to just have it plugged in. They're quite good when it comes to data protection, as in you don't really allow many people access to the data, mainly because they want access to the data and they don't want to share it with anyone. But by doing that, they almost make the data in a protected bubble in its own right. So like something like Apple, for example, like the idea that they would share the data with like the security services, they won't share the data with security services at all because they hate doing it and they almost refuse to do it. Like they won't, they're on record regularly, like not really wanting to have backdoors into it and not really wanting to give access to the data to various agencies around the world before. So I can see why. Google, not so much. Google have had their moments.
Although a really important protection in this whole thing is the fact that they're doing it together because they hate each other so much. That's a lie. Is that Google think that basically is that Apple is just trying to turn this into a luxury privacy product. Apple think that Google are just trying to use it as a backdoor to get everyone's data. That is actually, it's quite an important protection because they are watching each other like hawks.
They are dying to take the other one to court. Like they're dying.
But it's that the whole kind of like national governments thing. It's just a sideshow as far as they're concerned. It's all about the rivalry between them. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Like it's all true. But then they really are dictating in a large way what democratically elected governments do. And it's just in fact because you've got an iPhone that once you've gone down that route, you're locked in, and maybe you think, oh, I'd really like to change. I'd really like to do just one little thing different, and the iPhone won't let you. It's not allowed.
So yeah, I mean, I guess we'd advise our listeners to definitely follow you on Twitter. I'm sure you'll be tweeting a lot about how the kind of testing and stuff on the app develops and how this story develops, and I'm sure they can trust you to give them good advice about whether they should be using this government app or not, or if there's a better alternative. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of speak to you about, you did an interesting thread about all your kind of tech findings from the last general election back in December, which seems like a very long time ago right now, doesn't it? So yeah, I guess we want to talk to you a little about some of that stuff and some of the more interesting stuff that you kind of came across. So I get from a tech point of view, what kind of stories were you covering with Sky throughout the election?
Oh wow! I mean, I've got to be honest. I loved the election.
Yeah,
it was just wonderful being able to just focus on kind of all this stuff that I really care about, and for it to for it to have that prominence. I mean, I did quite a lot on the kind of political advertising side. Picking up the platforms, like we found with my colleague Alex Martin, we found Google kept on breaking its own rules about political advertising, because Google promises to kind of add a disclaimer, but it didn't to political ads, but it didn't, and then we got in touch to find out why, and they were like, oh yeah, that was us. So to be able to kind of in a way, they've promised to do these things, and they are the regulator. They are all powerful in this case, and to be able to kind of to provide that accountability and to hold them to account like that is really satisfying. Although, of course, slightly it makes you feel a bit pessimistic when you realise that it doesn't mean anything. Like nothing really changes, or because there's no kind of greater power to hold them to account.
Yeah, it's just you. You're it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you write a piece, and then there's a bit of a stink, and then it happens again, and then you do the same thing, and then it happens again, and you do the same thing, and you're like, oh right, okay, you guys really don't care, do you?
Yeah, you don't. You don't give a shit.
But then having said that, is that after all that pressure was partly what convinced sort of pushed Facebook into doing a lot more with its political ad archive. I did quite a bit on kind of that and looking at the different strategies of the different parties. I did some stuff looking at kind of because I think the SNP have a really kind of interesting digital operation. I did some stuff on them. I broke some stories about how like the Brexit Party were being investigated by the Information Commissioner's Office. So it's all sort of melded into one because it just seems so long ago. And I think like at that point I was like breaking a story a day, and it was so it was quite relentless. I've missed that so many things anyway.
No, so
how did that pan out? See, the Brexit Party, how did that pan out? The investigation that was going into them.
Yeah, you ask a great question. I wish we. I think, actually, to be honest, I think it's a fault of mine and of journalism in general that we don't follow up our stories, and that we're because I'm onto the new thing, and I suppose in that case they were being investigated because they hadn't responded to subject access requests, so requests for the data they held on people. They claimed that they'd been bombarded by subject access requests in a malicious campaign, although I was unable to find any evidence of that actually happening.
Yeah.
And anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter. They have a legal obligation to respond to those and give people their data. And it's so the resolution should be is that did anyone actually get their data? But to find that out is really hard because it's like how do I find out who put in requests? But actually, is that I did speak to a few people who had, so I should get back in touch to find out what they got.
An answer, yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's almost a ridiculous language for it used to suggest that there was like if everyone that they had data on was to make the request, then they're entitled to. Like the idea that there was millions of people asking for their data, so what we expect to do, we'll give them their data. It's literally they're legally entitled to. Like the idea that just too many people asked for it, so we couldn't be asked is essentially the outcome of their argument. Is not a good stance legally.
Yeah, well, I mean, but from a transparency point of view, I'd say that all the parties, with one exception, were awful. Because with Open Rights Group, I put in subject access requests to all the different parties. Lib Dems, back to us straight away, within the time limit. Everything was exactly how you want it.
That's kind of what you would expect of the Lib Dems, though, to be fair, isn't it? Like,
it's a very Lib Dem way.
Incredibly dull, but yeah. But
obviously we rewarded them by doing a massive piece about their data profiling.
It's the only info we've got, so that's so unfortunately, guys.
I did feel bad after that because it's that although it did contain like lots, I really kind of tried to have lots of caveats explaining that this was very common, that all the parties probably did this. But at that point, we only had the Lib Dem one. And the fact that they were profiling kind of people on like 42 different scores, including like their kind of, their sort of liberalness and things like that. I mean, the job is to tell people what's going on. And it probably made them, it probably didn't reward them for doing such a good job of transparency. That's a tricky balance to strike, I think.
Serves them right for being fucking so stupid, does it? For giving it to you straight away. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
There is also that argument where like they look at it, the longer one of the parties take to return the information, it may just be them dragging the heels. But there's also the questions like, well, are they hiding something? Because if they don't send it straight away, and the Liberal Democrats probably understand more than anybody of the way that public opinion can dramatically change when you don't do the things you'd expect.
All the other parties probably watched your piece on the Liberal Democrats' data and thought, well, we're not giving them that. So
yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, Labour eventually got back to us.
Yeah.
They had a really weird system. They scored So they took like a constituency and then ranked everyone from 1 all the way down to 30,000 on a whole bunch of things like austerity, what else, like kind of how they felt about taxation.
What was number 1? Like the most Labour person?
Yeah.
Most Labour.
Yeah, exactly. So you probably think that if they did it in Islington, then Jeremy Corbyn would be like he'd be number 1, ranked 1 for everything. But I found, and I spoke to some data scientists about it, because I was like, that seems a really strange thing to do. I spoke to some data scientists and they were like, yeah, no, you're not wrong. That we're quite confused by that too. But anyway, but that actually is like one of the sort of the lessons from this, is that they get a lot wrong and their data isn't necessarily that good. But I still think it's really important to cover it, because is that their bad data is shaping the way they campaign massively. So Matthew Rice, my kind of collaborator at Open Rights Group in Scotland, he was listed as a sort of elderly married man in his 50s, and his scores were kind of basically implied that he wouldn't be a Labour voter, and without kind of giving anything away about him, like that is that in so many ways that's not who he is. But what that meant in practice is that he wasn't going to get a phone call, he wasn't going to get a knock on the door, he wasn't going to get that leaflet. And so, so the whole kind of universe of campaigning is deeply shaped by this terrible data. Of course, that is actually an argument for them to have better data, to have more data on us. So it's not necessarily like a sort of an anti-surveillance argument, but I think it's anyway. Just as a journalist, I think it's really important to cover this stuff, because it's sort of the hidden lever that really shapes the hidden lever that kind of moves the world, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it's just a demonstration that they could be doing things a lot better as well, I guess.
Well, to me, it's just the danger that they're collecting lots of data, but because in the nicest possible way, so many of the people who are then involved in it are so far out of touch with all the information that they're getting, they're collecting needless amounts of data points, which means it's skewing the results all over the place. Like, there has been companies and legal cases of companies that do it very well because the information that they collect is concise, because that's what they use for their data modelling, and they know, essentially, they work back from the results they want to get, and they work back the data model, as opposed to the way that essentially you've summarised data, Labour's data, as they've just been like, here's all the data.
The Premier League of Labour voters.
How can we score this data? Like, so they just then start, and like, there's a think tank somewhere where it's just like, but how do they feel about the price of meat that's being imported from New Zealand? And then they add that to the list and they give that a point. Do you know what I mean? Like, just, well, it's
there's a possibility as well that, like, you know, if they're using the data that they have to inform policy, and their data is all to pot, then, you know, they're not necessarily going to put policy together which translates to what their electorate kind of wants or needs in their lives as well, or you know, it's potentially damaging for everybody if all of the data that all the political parties have on us is not very good, you know. So one of the things which I kind of came across in your reporting was a kind of throwaway tweet about the fact check, the Conservative HQ fact check kind of scandal on Twitter when they changed their name during the leaders' debate. So I think my reading of the tweet that you put out was that potentially the tactic there may just have been to draw attention to the fact that they had done that and away from the debate itself. Did I read that wrong, or is that something that you think might have been a tactic?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I can't remember the exact numbers, but we analysed how many tweets there had been about the different leaders versus that particular topic. And that particular topic generated so much interaction and engagement compared to the leaders. I mean, it seemed to me that a big kind of Conservative strategy during the election was that whenever kind of the debate seemed to get onto kind of issues, Labour's issues, which sort of or kind of issues of substance, they would kind of sort of essentially do some trolling. draw it onto a sort of kind of row about media. So one thing that they did, which was extremely effective, this really worked, was when they bought up the domain Labour Manifesto. I think it was they bought the domain labourmanifesto.co.uk and then ran Google ads so that anyone who Googled Labour or Labour Manifesto went to that site. And I thought at the time, that was a kind of very clever way of sort of injecting some noise into the Labour Manifesto launch and basically distracting Labour. And it was also, in fact, I think it was a technique that Boris Johnson used in one of his London mayoral campaigns. So it's sort of, like a kind of quite an old style trick. But I saw some numbers more recently about that and just how much traffic that particular microsite drove to the Conservative homepage. And I think it was maybe their kind of sort of second biggest referrer during the whole election. So people actually read it. So and while it's tough politics, it got across a kind of strong message about what they thought was wrong with the Labour Manifesto, while also disrupting completely Labour's launch. And yeah, I mean clearly, obviously, the results prove it, that they did run a very effective campaign. And yeah, so say like that fact check thing. I mean, it was so obviously done to distract people. That was the purpose of it, wasn't it? And I suppose that, as as the media, yeah, maybe we massively fell into it. It's very hard not to cover that stuff, and kind of because at the time it seems important.
Yeah.
Well, when we spoke off air when we were talking about the numbers, when recently during the coronavirus update, I was talking about the fact that we've seen both the Trump and we've seen the Conservatives both use, when they were giving out numbers, give out large numbers and make a mistake of them and stuff like that, and use very similar language in a couple of press conferences afterwards, and much the same scenario. That essentially what you do is you create that as a talking point. So the information that's being put across then becomes less of a talking point because you have done this thing, and it seems to be, it's very similar to the idea of changing the fact check. The fact that then everybody is talking about it being changed to fact check, they're not talking about what it is. And by the same principle, we've got examples of people are talking about someone totally mucked up the number that they were saying, rather than talking about the impact of the numbers that they were talking about. And it is a very easy way, because then suddenly you've got memes about these things on the internet, rather than people saying, but did they not just say 11 million people were going to die? You know what I mean? Like these things go in the back burner. So it's interesting to see that that's still occurring. Do you know what I mean? And like that, we have other examples of that in the current crisis as well, because it obviously works.
But it's interesting that does it work, because I think that, like, by sort of this quite common consensus that the government's comms haven't been a roaring success in this coronavirus.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
that's an understatement.
Well, I don't want to overstate it, because you never quite know what everyone is thinking about out there. But that does seem to be kind of quite a commonly held opinion. And I mean, maybe it just goes to show that elections are very different to governing. And I'm quite struck by that. Is that we kind of think that, say, like people like Dominic Cummings and Isaac Levino and the people who run the Number 10 comms operation, is that we think that they're brilliant at comms. And in some ways they are, because they've got a really good record of winning public votes. Yeah. But I've been thinking this recently, that I wonder if basically that doesn't necessarily make you brilliant at comms. It makes you brilliant at one specific kind of comms. Yeah. And that, because it does sometimes seem like they sort of go into election mode a little bit, and it's not necessarily working out for them, right? I
mean, even just the parallels between things like, it was strong and stable, and then it was get Brexit done, and then we've had stay home, protect NHS, save lives.
Although everyone loved that, and it seems to have been very successful, right? So obviously they're not idiots. They've done well with that one.
But it's a simple, concise message, and that's potentially enough to win an election. But it's not necessarily enough to deal with the complexities and nuance.
Deal with the pandemic,
you know.
Well, weirdly, what you're saying actually mirrors the interview that we had with Shamir yesterday, which he said something very similar regarding them, which is that there's a lot of those people who are very good at a specific task, as in, like, he wouldn't so Dominic Cummings, he actually says, is a very clever man who's well read. He's actually better read. He actually said, unlike most people in Westminster, he actively reads, goes out his way to understand, like, various sciences and stuff like that. But he was saying across the board, essentially, the team of people that are around him are very good at pushing a message, are very good at a very specific part of media and interaction, but they're not. He wouldn't class a lot of the people that he was interacting with as, like, overly, like, intelligent or brilliant at the overall job, but rather very good at this specific type of thing, which is, like I said, push a message and regurgitate a message. And it kind of mirrors exactly what you were saying there, which is, you know, like, when they go into election mode, they are pushing messages and they're doing that, and that is their skill set, and that's what they do. But maybe they're not particularly great at just, you know, day-to-day media, or when we say day-to-day media, global pandemic media.
Even
you know
just leadership and organisation, I guess.
But also is that I think is that this pandemic has come at a very bad time if you want the people in power to be good at the kind of comms of government, because we've lived through this extremely strange period in unusual period in UK history where there's just been vote after vote after vote after vote after vote, and we have a brand new government. So because it's that Blair's early kind of government wasn't the comms genius that it was often perceived to be, and they got quite a lot of things wrong early on, but they improved as they went. And when that makes sense, right? Doesn't it? Is that you learn on the job, and you kind of, you know, what you want is a few mild crises to
Yeah.
sorry, obviously
not
cut your
thrown in
teeth.
a global pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, you've been training on the running machine, and then suddenly it's like, right, you're on marathon, and
Let's go.
And yeah, exactly. Or you know, you've been doing like the punching bag, and you get thrown in with Tyson Fury or something like that. Whereas, yeah, you hoped for a bit of something to build you up along the way.
Oh no, I'm woefully underprepared for this.
yeah. Well, but even on the comms is that they probably would have improved after even a couple of years in government.
Yeah,
might have. That's. I mean, this is just a guess. This is not based on anything at all. But in terms of kind of that thing that we sort of that it does seem to be that sometimes they're in election mode. Is that, yeah? I mean, of course they are. They've just come off winning an election, and they did that. They're really good at it.
Yeah,
and the thing is, with the people that have come into the election mode, actually a lot of that team are the people who were the Brexit team. Do you know what I mean? Or
they were campaigning, right?
Yeah, so they are like that. That's their skill set. That's what they've been running for. And then now, essentially 5 weeks later, 6 weeks later, they found themselves like knee deep in the worst crisis that. Well, certainly one of the worst things that I've seen in my relatively short life on Earth. Do you know what I mean? Like, and they are, yeah. So I can see how that's a massive change in the way that you have to, you know. I mean, you're not reassuring anyone during an election as such. You're telling them this is how things are going to be, whereas there's much more compassion involved in the last 8 weeks. Maybe you don't.
You're not having to make difficult policy decisions necessarily either during an election, are you? You know, and like,
so, it's. I mean, it's hard.
Let's be honest. Like, regular listeners of our show will be aware that we're not huge conservative fans or anything like that. But I wouldn't wish having to manage this crisis on anybody. You know, I can't imagine it's a particularly easy thing to have to do. And yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, rather them than me. But by the same token, I don't think that means they should be free from criticism when they do get things wrong. You know, and it's the job of people like yourself, Rowland, and the journalistic community to hold them to account and to make sure that they're doing their job properly.
Curiously, on that, Rowland, do you think that this is a baptism of fire for a lot of the media team? Like, as in, when we're talking about how they're going to get better, do we expect to see that we're going to see a higher calibre of media moving forward for the rest of the Conservative Party there? Like, would you expect to see that, going the idea that they've certainly had to deal with the worst thing that they had to deal with? That media team are going to be like you could throw anything at them after this, and they're going to be quite sturdy.
So, I mean, I have no idea, because I don't do that much sort of lobby journalism or interacting with that team. Like, I don't really know them. But that's just my guess. It just seems to me that people learn from experience, right? And if you look at the background of all that team and everyone there, then it sort of seems to me to stand to reason that this must be quite tough. And like you said, I mean, I'm just struck by the fact that they're really good at slogans in the main, and slogans, but slogans are an election thing, and some of the other comms, it seems to be electiony. But I honestly, I don't really know, because I don't do that kind of hobnobbing with all the spads and the Prime Minister's spokesperson and all that.
So what's what have you got coming up next, other than obviously an in-depth analysis of the tracing app?
Oh well, so today I was getting my antibody tests results back, because I've been doing basically, because I've as well as doing the sort of tech stuff, I've been doing a lot on testing. And yeah, so covering that, and like especially during the early days when it was really struggling to get going.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking at antibody testing, and then I got an antibody test for myself. When's this going to go out? Because I don't want to spoil because our piece is going to go out tomorrow. So can I talk about?
We'll wait till after tomorrow. Then we'll wait till after.
It'll probably be a couple of days, because we released an episode today. So yeah, it'll probably be a couple of days.
Yeah, it was as a process, it was really interesting. So you have to fill like a small sort of vial of blood, which was, took me about 20 minutes. I needed three fingers, and then sent it off. And like I said, in early March, I had like a tight chest and a bit of a sore throat.
Yeah,
and I've always wondered, like,
was it coronavirus? Yeah.
Was it coronavirus? Well, basically, kind of hoping that it might be coronavirus, that I might have massively lucked out, and that I'd be immune. That was my hope.
Yeah.
Turned out that it definitely, according to the antibody test, definitely was not coronavirus.
Right.
But then also, is that as I started to dig into the science, it seems like that the tests are, when you send them off to the lab, they're really quite accurate. They're they are improving quite rapidly. They're the ones where you do them at home, like the sort of pregnancy test, that's much more complicated. When you send it off to a lab, you can get a really quite accurate result. But our knowledge of what that means for immunity is really nowhere, and we just don't really know. So even if you do have the antibodies, we honestly have no idea what this means for immunity. And so the funny thing is that the purpose of this test, from a sort of functional level, is to clear up your uncertainty. Like, did you or did you not have it? And just from a psychological point of view, I actually really, even if that's all it does, I think it's actually, it really helps. It really helps. I would encourage anyone to do it. Just it's £90. I mean, like, work paid for mine. So it's quite a lot of money. But if you can afford it, just for your own personal satisfaction.
So
I don't know.
To be clear, it'll just tell you whether or not you've had it at some point.
Yes. So it identifies the. Sorry, I didn't probably explain that very clearly. If you've had it, then you would generate antibodies, and it tests to see whether the antibodies are there. There's some debate over whether or not how sensitive it is, and whether if you've had it kind of quite mildly and you haven't generated many antibodies, will it pick those up? But the people doing the test seem to be very confident. There seems to be an emerging kind of science on this, but what it just can't tell you at all is what that means.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say, because as I understand it, and obviously you've looked into it more, but as I understand it, the scenario is that even if you've had it, you can't be sure if that means you're immune for 3 months or 6 months or a year or forever or not at all. But like, they don't know They don't know if you, by getting the results saying you've had the antibodies, that means that you, like I said, that you couldn't get it again, because they don't know what kind of immunity you have to it at the other side of it at all. Like, they don't know if you can catch it again, or if this is like using variants like the flu and various common colds where you get an immunity to it, but it's not an indefinite immunity to it. It fades over time, so it could last for 6 months, or it could last for no time at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so in a sense, is that the whole thing is quite useless in a practical sense. But in terms of sort of clearing up, I mean, I feel like everyone I know has sort of thought, well, maybe I did actually have coronavirus, including my mum, who, if she had coronavirus when she thinks that she might have had it, she's actually patient zero in the UK. So, although in the early days, I went on a cab ride with a guy, and he said that he had it in October last year, and I feel like is that everyone has sort of got this little niggling thought, oh, maybe I have had it, and just to clear that up.
Yeah,
it was an interesting process. It kind of made me think about like the psychological benefits for it, even if functionally I'm not sure that it actually really does that much. It's sort of almost like a luxury.
So when you say that, like, it felt kind of quite good to know that you hadn't had it. Like, I guess if I'm thinking about it, I feel like it would make me feel better maybe knowing that I had, because I would feel like there was less chance of me getting it again. So
oh yeah, I was gutted when I got the result. Absolutely gutted.
Oh, were you? Yeah.
Yeah, I really was. But now, at least I know. At least I'm not. There's not part of me thinking, hey, maybe I did get it.
Yeah, you'll be more careful based on.
But that's what I was going to say. Surely it changes that side of things. Like because I'm not saying that this is who you are as a person, but surely there's the danger that, you get the result and you look at it and you go, yes, I've had it, out like in fucking lamppost for the next 3 days, because it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like in the supermarket, rubbing yourself off strangers because you can't get it. Like, but you know what I mean?
No,
like,
you're right. I think it's a danger. Yeah, it is a danger. Yeah, there's definitely a worry there, especially. But on the other hand, that was my kind of takeaway, is that I thought that there was a real role to play in clearing up people's uncertainty, because I think there's so much uncertainty around right now that just a little bit of sort of definite knowledge is so helpful.
Something to cling on to.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is, I was getting blood taken in December because I had all sorts of illness that the doctor wasn't sure what it was, and I had a lot of fatigue and they weren't sure what it was. And obviously they weren't testing for coronavirus in December. So there is always a component in my head where it's like, maybe that's what it was. Maybe the reason that I was ill in December and they weren't sure what it was, and it passed after 3 or 4 weeks, was because, like I was very lethargic and I had kind of flu symptoms, but there was no sign of it actually being that, and like my energy was really low and stuff. So they tested for a pile of things, and my results all came back pretty much clear. So
yeah, because doesn't everyone secretly think they've had coronavirus? I swear, everyone I know is pretty convinced that actually, yeah, I had that one time I coughed. It was probably coronavirus, because it's also that secret hope. I've got it and I've got away with it.
Yeah, I'm out of corona for 3 weeks, but it didn't affect me. I was just digging the back garden with corona, like a.
Although from a kind of population level, the super depressing thing is that the early results from different countries seem to suggest that there is not a hidden iceberg of people who've had it and recovered. That actually, very few people have had it, but the mortality rate is really high. So that's kind of really grim.
Was there not a lot? Was there not? Iceland had done quite a lot of testing on their pro rata to their population. It's a small island of about 330,000 people. So did they not initial testing not seem to show that a large amount of people there were asymptomatic carriers, essentially? That around 50% of the people who had been tested positive weren't showing symptoms for coronavirus at all.
That's what it was. They tested 60% of the population, and 50% of that population came up as having had it, but obviously that didn't match up with the amount of people that had it and were like hospitalised or whatever. So there was a massive percentage of essentially like 30% of the population has had it entirely in the whole of Iceland, but like only 10% of them ended up in hospital with it. So like 20% of the population
that
was asymptomatic.
That was quite early on. So
I don't remember the Iceland thing, but so today, Spain, the early results from Spain showed that So where there have been 27,000 COVID deaths, they show that only 5% of the Spanish population has been exposed to the virus. Yeah, in terms of basically that was from a kind of large-scale blood study like the one that I did with 60,000 participants. So, and the only, I mean, and this, it could possibly be that the testing isn't sensitive enough, but the results seem to suggest that actually, yeah, we're a really long way from herd immunity. It's very concerning because the big hope was that there'd be a huge sort of hidden amount of people out there who actually did have it, and that we would be kind of maybe able to achieve some kind of herd immunity. But unless these tests aren't picking it up, then that doesn't seem to be the case. Which it's actually terrible news.
That is really bad news. Yeah, that is really.
Well, actually, on that, since you are in London and since the advice has now changed, we're still stay at home, save lives, and you guys are staying alert. You watch out for viruses sneaking up on you.
Exactly.
How is that now going to affect? Like, so where do you see that over the next couple of weeks for you? Like, so obviously, as a reporter who's out and has to go and do things and stuff anyway, there's the very real danger that you're going to be now around more people than you were for the last 7 weeks, because there's now more people that are going to be out and about and, you know, travelling about in London and stuff like that. So what's the feeling from the media point of view of where that's going to go over the next week or so for you guys? Because
what do you mean, like on a personal level?
Yeah, on a personal level, because for us, like, obviously we're locked down for the next 3 weeks, regardless. We're still another 3 weeks into this, whereas for the next 3 weeks, for as far as I've been able to see for the news for the last couple of days, people are like going to the beach and they're all on the tube again and stuff like that. Like, it's getting a bit wild.
Has London been noticeably busier from your point of view?
Yeah, the traffic's been terrible, or rather back to normal. I mean, where I live, last weekend in the parks, absolutely rammed. It was, people everywhere, and that was actually before the new rules came in.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just been on a kind of, for me personally, I've just been sort of trying to steer clear of public places, but it's stressful, isn't it? I hate going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And I haven't had to take public transport yet, but I'm sure that I will. I'm sure it's going to be a really a really unpleasant experience. I'm not looking forward to it at all. But then, what can you do? No, so the big debate that we've been having is that should we sort of restart our childcare? And because it's I mean, you know, how do you do that? So we've been doing a risk assessment. We actually completed our own risk assessment, and basically the answer is that it's quite kind of risky. So
yeah,
but the government guidance says that you're okay to start childcare again.
As long as it's not a member of your family that does it. Yeah,
but I mean, let's be real. There's going to be no social distancing between my 1-year-old and his nanny, and it's going to be pretty hard. We can keep our distance from, but it's going to be pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like it's that kind of moral dilemma has really been playing on my mind. I don't really know what the right thing to do is.
Well, yeah, especially when you're in a position where you're getting lots of information and you're working in the media, you're working specifically on coronavirus much of the time. At the moment, you're getting so much information. When you see something like the article you just spoke about in Spain, it looks like 5% of people have been infected, but 26,000 people are dead, and you're seeing a city kind of coming back to life around about you. I don't envy you, to be honest with you, mate. I'm quite happy to be up in Scotland where we're still locked down at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I'm a risk vector, because I go out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of the reason I was asking, because specifically what you have to do. I mean, your job doesn't really lend itself to not going out, you know what I mean? You have to go and do that. So the idea that you're now going to be subjected to the populace that are now out and about, when you're also then going home at night and reading stuff for work that's really depressing, can't be a nice Can't be a nice situation.
It's worrying. I guess I'm lucky that I'm sort of youngish.
young, yeah.
Yeah, but it's nice. It's just I hate this virus.
I feel like you're depressing. I feel like we're depressed.
It must be brutal, man.
My youngest gets up pretty much every morning and says, "Is the coronavirus away, Daddy?" I'm like, no, it's still here.
Oh no!
It's like,
so sweet.
He gets so angry. He's like, "I hate the coronavirus, Daddy."
I hate the coronavirus too. It's I think it's sentiment we all share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says he's going to punch the coronavirus in the face. I don't think he's really got his head around how viruses work yet, unfortunately. But you could try it. You could try it.
Yeah, go for it.
In all fairness, there seems to be a whole pile of Americans who are standing in different places with guns with the intention of shooting the coronavirus. So it's not a million miles away from that mindset.
We just got to hope the coronavirus hasn't read those warnings that it's not staying alert.
Well, listen, man, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us, and best of luck. Stay safe down in London, and keep reporting what's happening, what's going on out there in the tech world.
Thanks. You too. Great to chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much. It's been awesome, man. Thanks, mate.